So I want to end tonight with something we've touched on already a couple of times in this show, the way that power in our country has been centralised, totally contradicting the idea at the heart of our Constitution, which is decentralised power, power in people's hands. Of course, we see that in terms of government, where more and more decisions are being taken away from state and local government and put in the hands of the federal government and its massive bureaucracy. But it's true in the economy too. Everywhere you look, big business is squeezing out small business. And in fact, these two terrible trends go together. There's increasingly an alliance between big government and big business, sometimes inadvertently, where government bureaucrats just casually and thoughtlessly spew out rules and regulations that big corporations can easily comply with, but which are a nightmare for smaller firms. But honestly, it can be more sinister. An active war on small business being fought by big business and big government corruptly colluding with each other. That argument was one made to me incredibly powerfully on the podcast the other week by the brilliant chef and entrepreneur and anti-lockdown resistance hero, Andrew Gruel. And he joins us now. Andrew, I just sort of summarise what you told me, but from your perspective as someone who's been struggling against all this, just tell us how you see it.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Effectively, what's happened is that big business has gotten a ton of cash specifically from the government, and as a result of deregulation on the big business side, it's the smaller businesses that no longer have access to this capital and this cash. And what's happening is they can't develop those economies of scale necessary in order to compete in this business environment. There was so much cash that was available coming through the pandemic, and it was just coming down in hordes, but it was not distilling to the small businesses. It was difficult for them to get. They didn't necessarily have the accounting firms and the capability in order to access a lot of these funds, in addition to the fact that we know that billions and billions of dollars were misappropriated through fraud that the government kind of turned a blind eye on. And then the cash was just on it was a river directly to the large businesses. And now we're in an economy where things are uncertain. There's a lack of access to capital by way of these increased interest rates. There's a lot of uncertainty. Inflation is just driving everybody out of, kind of their typical comfort level when it comes to going out and visiting a lot of these small businesses. So a lot of compounding influences specifically created by this relationship between big business and in many cases Silicon Valley and the government.
And a couple of the examples you gave were really shocking. I mean, one was in relation to zoning and local decisions in terms of, who gets to do what in terms of local development.
Yeah, it certainly is. Where it used to be a relationship between a local small business, perhaps somebody who's got 5 to 10 employees and the city councils and the local zoning boards. Now there's a lot more influence coming down from a larger kind of state perspective, especially here in California, while that feels like the federal government. And then obviously the federal government's control over a lot of these various local jurisdictions by way of new regulations, red tape, and then just the economy overall. Some of it isn't direct, some of it is indirect, but it still has the same effect.
And then the IRS seemed to be waging a war on small business as well.
Yes, we talked about how all these new IRS agents weren't going to affect anybody making less than, that $400,000 threshold. But we know that that's not the case, especially when it comes specific to the restaurant industry. We know that there's a significant sum of IRS agents that have been allocated in order to retroactively go after servers' tips, right? Servers, people who don't make more than $75,000 to $100,000 a year. And if they underreport their tips, then the IRS agents are going to audit them and they're going to be really specific about how much they claimed. But then it's the businesses that end up having to pay the penalties, and they get penalized for any misappropriation of tip claims by way of the server themselves. And it's just another way in which they can kind of reach into the pockets of these small business owners, take out capital, take out cash that they need in order to grow. And look, more than 50%, I think it's somewhere around 60% of jobs created in the United States are driven by small to medium-sized businesses. So ultimately, this can have a devastating effect in the next 5 to 10 years when it comes to the growth of jobs, the GDP, and the economy as a whole.
Exactly. I mean, you're so smart about all this. Apart from, the fact that you just laid it all out so clearly, you should be some analyst on Fox Business or something. But you also are an amazing entrepreneur. And you have a fantastic restaurant where I had a wonderful meal the other week. So I've got to let you just tell anyone who's in Southern California where they can go to get your food.
Well, it's Calico Fish House, so we're just, kind of a local family-run business. You'll see all four of my kids back in the kitchen, and we're producing locally grown, seed oil-free, sustainable fare, and we're trying to do it at a reasonable rate. I mean, for us, I joke, I say this is my nonprofit, and I'm not talking about 501c3.
It's fantastic. Calico Fish House, it's wonderful. You're great. Andrew, thank you so much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.